Last year when I saw Wicked for the first time, I did not expect to like it at all whatsoever, but I found myself pretty encapsulated by the characters and the world. Fast forward a year, the long-awaited epic conclusion to the Wicked story hits the big screen, Wicked for Good. For some more context, I know nothing about the original novel nor the play, so I'm really just judging this as a movie on its own. And the first film might have some technical flaws, but the content and the performances of the film, there is genuinely nothing to complain about. It's epic and it's emotional and it takes you on this 3-hour long journey, but I think that might just be the biggest flaw of Wicked Part 2. Before you harass me in the comments, I was pretty entertained by this film. I think fans will love it and it will make a lot of money. I think Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, hell, even Jonathan Bailey are fucking amazing. But one thing I do know about the Broadway show is that it runs just under 3 hours long, but so does the first movie. So like flat out point blank, I just don't think Wicked for Good needs to exist. For fans of the musical, you're in for a treat. This movie feels like the emotional buildup and release. You care about all of these characters, this story, and this world. But for me, the entire film feels like an amalgamation of decent individual scenes, but that add up to nothing. And I guess brings us to a very lackluster finale because it tries to be these epic, big scale blockbuster moments, but then wraps up in a way similar to the play from what I've seen that just doesn't work in a film format. I can't really say it's fan service because I've never really seen the Broadway show. It doesn't give you a final push for every character dynamic because everything kind of stays the same. For example, I really like that Ballad of the Songbirds and Snakes is one big part. It's a long ass movie, but I think it's worth it. I see where they would have split it into a part 2, but I'm glad they did it. On the other hand, I think Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2 was split up in a good way just because there is an objective for each part of the film, which leads us to have one final character arc push. I can't really say that for Wicked for Good. It feels like every single character is kind of just at the same exact point the entire film. After watching Wicked 1, I was really happy that they split it up into 2 parts because the singular evolution within the story and the characters and that kind of coming of age vibe that I really liked of the first film was so good in the first movie. The second film feels like it lacks any transfer of that magical world that Wicked has. The transition, I guess, of the story and the characters feels so blunt. It doesn't feel like we're, at least to me, watching a part 2. To an extent, it feels like we're watching completely different characters, and that might make sense when there's Act 1 and Act 2 of a play where you have a 15-minute intermission between. I do think fans of the play will understand, though, that this is just the second act of the play, and that's okay, but you also have to view this as its own individual movie, or at least I am. When you take a step back and view this as just a movie and not necessarily Act 2 of a play, I think fans of the play will be okay with this film not necessarily having any big arc. But for me, looking at it as just a movie, there's no story and arc. There's nothing remotely individually interesting about this film itself. There's only 2 things that really warrant this film's existence in my opinion. The first one is Elphaba and Fiyoro's dynamic, which I'll talk about later, but I also think that the sets and action is just on a different scale than the first movie because again, the first movie is actually developing characters. This is like the entire third act of what that first film was building up to. It just doesn't work when it's its own movie. I did the math, and after Wicked for Good, we have 5 hours of film adaptation for an under 3-hour long Broadway show. I think it just proves that Wicked Part 2 didn't really need to be made, and if you like the play, you will probably be like, oh my god, these scenes are so cool, I'm super happy to see them on the big screen. 99% of this movie could have been cut out and just been implemented into the first film. A lot of people that thought Wicked Part 1 didn't really have a satisfying third act were like, oh, Part 2 will rectify it. I didn't really see that at all. First of all, I thought Part 1 was really great in and of itself, but maybe I'm misremembering Part 1 of the film, but Part 2 didn't do much in terms of changing character stances, morals, or actions, and it's kind of just influenced by scale. Every single thing in the back half of Part 1's film, but at a whole different level. Glinda is more powerful, or Fiyoro works directly for the wizard, but nothing is truly different. I actually did tear up the first time I saw Wicked Part 1, and I think a lot of it had to do with the performances, and I think this time around, the performances are just as good as the first film. They actually feel like they have a lot more of emotional emotional one-on-one character moment material to work with, but I was so uninvested in every single character dynamic. And again, it felt like such a combination of random peaking moments and scenes that I never really felt the emotional impact of performances. There's a lot of tears, there's a lot of crying, there's a lot of emotionally high moments. I do think there are some Oscar nominations coming this film's way in an acting sense. Part 1 also got a good amount of technical nominations, and I thought it pretty much looked like mud, even though the sets were absolutely phenomenal. And I think the first half of this film, that's the same thing, but the second half mostly takes place at night, and they really just scale up all of the emotional and action moments. The entire film feels like it's high tension, boiling up moments, and so it does feel like they are working at a slightly different scale. I think it is like this big epic conclusion, at least in the second half of the film, when they actually get to like cohesive action things going on rather than just like a bunch of setup scenes in the first half. It makes the entire film feel entertaining to me, but it does still lead to a pretty underwhelming ending for me personally. It's a musical, so we have to talk about the music. I think the music is so good. I think Dancing Through Life is still my favorite song out of both films, but For Good and the reprises that they're able to do, the way that they're able to craft it in emotional moments, it's genuinely so phenomenal. The final thing I'll say is, for me, the resolution is really the icing on the cake, making this an underwhelming, not only part 2, but just general finale for all of these characters. And I won't get into details, but if you know the play, you know like the ending big peaking resolution moment is a silhouette of the character. It's not an epic moment per se, but when you see it on Broadway, or in my case, a recorded version of it, it kind of does look cool. It's this really interesting set piece that allows for this like three-dimensional, you're kind of in the moment experience. That might work in the play, but damn, is it just not an interesting moment in the film. Overall, I'm gonna give Wicked for Good a 5 out of 10. If you've seen or want to check out this film, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.